Welcome back to more UCL Fantasy content. This will be a double upload with the team selection ahead of Matchday 4. Stay tuned for tomorrow's deadline stream where I'll answer all of your questions and also ensure you've got the latest graphics, team news, injury updates, the top 10 captains, clean sheet odds, you name it. It will all be compiled into an ultimate guide, and you can see different elements of what I just discussed across my different videos, like the best wildcard team, the Limitless squad for Matchday 4, and of course during this team selection where I'll delve into my Matchday 3 performance first and foremost, and then talk about my transfer plans, my provisional team selection, and a few alternative moves I could make. I'll also delve into the fixtures and analyze the best sort of opponents and clubs that you can really target. And the same goes for double and triple ups, both defensively and offensively. And ultimately, you want to have a bit of diversity in your squad as well, so you've got a nice balance. And chip strategies will also be mentioned throughout this podcast. I've still got the Limitless chip at my disposal. I used the wildcard back in Matchday 2 and secured some massive returns in the process. Join my UCL Fantasy Mini League. The code is SEINOF. There's an auto-join link in the description, and there's also many more links where that came from, like my Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Dylan RCM. You can also find me by typing FPL Dylan. The same goes to patreon.com/FPL Dylan for likes to my videos, prior to comments, amongst many other perks. That'll be particularly useful in tomorrow's deadline stream. The same goes for joining as a YouTube member, of course. Click the join button there on YouTube, hype the video as well on the YouTube app and all that good stuff. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy, which I'll cover until the end of the season. And after Matchday 4 is done, the full focus will shift towards Game Week 11 in Fantasy Premier League. Also check out my Spotify, leave a 5-star review, and also support the channel even further by joining my Discord server. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. It has been almost 2 weeks since Matchday 3, and it was yet another solid performance on the wildcard, which I deployed back in Matchday 2. And the same goes for my goalkeeper. I think David Raya is one of the very best in the business, and up until the end of the league phase, he might even be number 1. In terms of UCL fantasy points scored amongst goalkeepers, he is third behind Jan Sommer, and Thibaut Courtois is currently in top position. But that's another 6 points there for David Raya, who made a mistake against Atletico Madrid but wasn't punished. And Arsenal went the entire month of October across all competitions basically not conceding a single goal, and in the last 4 Premier League matches only 1 shot conceded on target, and ultimately it wasn't even a proper shot on target by Eddie Nketiah. As for my defensive line, I doubled up on the Arsenal defence with Gabriel Magalhaes. He got 15 points and he was very close to winning player of the match, but Victor Gyökeres pipped him to it with a brace himself. Denzel Dumfries did earn that award though with 18 points, and he is just an absolute machine in UCL Fantasy. He is top in terms of UCL fantasy points for that position, and Gabriel is third, whilst the likes of Ben Sebaini and Dan Burn have been solid. They both can get ball recoveries, but in the case of Ben Sebaini, he's also on penalties, and while Borussia Dortmund aren't keeping many clean sheets, that is the case with Newcastle, particularly in the Champions League, but they were very shaky against West Ham on Sunday. They lost 3-1 after taking the lead, and I think the two have been very inconsistent in that competition, but it's a different story in the Champions League. As for my 3 midfielders in the starting 11, Fermin Lopez was the star. I bought him very late on in the deadline stream because I saw the early lineups between Barcelona and Olympiacos. I liked the price tag and also the potential of the player. I had a gut feeling and I just went for it, and I was obviously a bit fortunate to get such a massive return. The red card for Olympiacos, which was contentious, also played a big part, but Fermin Lopez has carried over this form with a goal in El Clasico against Real Madrid, and he got 2 assists over the weekend against Elche in a 3-1 win for Barcelona. Elise has been quite disappointing, to be honest. Only 1 massive return against Paphos. He got an assist against Chelsea and a booking, I believe, back in Matchday 1, so only 4 points. And here, he only got 3 points in general. And actually, that's because of the clean sheet, the appearance points. And he was on 3 ball recoveries, but that was taken off after the game had finished. And Hakan Çalhanoğlu got a decent return there, but was subbed off just before 60 minutes, so he only got 6 points in the end. If he had stayed on for just a few seconds longer, it would have been 2 additional points, one for the clean sheet and the other one for playing 60 plus minutes in UCL Fantasy. And the final 3 players is basically the big 3, as I like to call them. It's not Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal, but instead Mbappe, Kane and Haaland. I did captain the Bayern Munich striker, who was rested over the weekend. At least he didn't start the game against Bayer Leverkusen. The same goes for Michael Olise in another 3-0 victory, and Bayern Munich have won 18 consecutive games across all competitions. That does include a few friendlies as well, but they've had the best ever start of any team in Europe's top 5 leagues, and Mbappe did blank against Juventus for the first time in the Champions League this season. He's 1 point behind Kane in the standings for UCL fantasy points amongst forwards, but those two are still worth including in the long term. The same goes for Erling Haaland, who was quite disappointing. I captained him on the Tuesday against Villarreal. He only got 1 goal, and that's why I switched to captaincy on the Wednesday, but both of them got the same return. Only 1 goal, 6 points, no player of the match or assists on top of it. And on my bench, Kanasechi got 7 points. And I also had Gusto, who didn't play anything whatsoever. He got 0 points there. So selling Van de Ven to Gusto was a mistake. And it's something I would like to rectify for Matchday 4. But I also think there are other potential issues or things I would like to do during tomorrow's deadline stream. But Yildiz blanked yet again. He missed the game over the weekend due to an injury, but the reports indicate he will be available against Sporting in Matchday 4, which is a massive boost for both Juventus and my UCL fantasy team. And Yilmaz, picking him over Atgun might have been a mistake as well. In the last couple of matches, Atgun is getting the returns. That includes Matchday 3 against Bodo Glimt, whilst Yilmaz blanked, and he also got fewer minutes in the process. So after all of that, I got another green arrow and over 100 points yet again. But after getting such a great return on Tuesday, I was already on 80 to 94 points basically, and I had 3 players left in Elise, Kane captain, and also Mbappe. Those 3 kind of let me down, but everyone else on the Tuesday returned. 8 returns out of 8. You know, the sky was the limit. So I think the Wednesday was a little bit disappointing in the end, but ultimately it's still over 225 points, something like that, in the space of 2 match days since I activated the wildcard. So that's 2 massive green arrows. I'm now at around 9k in the world, and historically I've done very well in UCL Fantasy with multiple top 1k finishes, and I think ultimately I'm always looking to improve and get my best ever rank, but it's getting even more competitive, especially this season and in the league phase. There is so much variety and many different options to choose from. The same applies to our chip strategies, and I would highly encourage you to check out my chip strategy guide at the beginning of this season. My advice is to use both of them during the league phase if possible. With the Limitless, do not use it in Matchday 8. There is a case to do so with the wildcard in Matchday 8 and then kind of use that as a Limitless chip. It's all discussed in that video, but I think for many people who wildcarded in Matchday 2 like myself, Matchday 5 looks the most appealing for that Limitless booster, especially if you have that goalkeeper pairing of Raya and Kanasechi. But let me highlight a few transfer plans I've got in mind for Matchday 4. These are not set in stone, and I will also be looking at the predicted lineups. If Malo Gusto is expected to start for Chelsea, then I would keep him, and I don't think it's worth selling him to Mickey van der Ven. This is a transfer I made going into Matchday 3, and ultimately I don't see it as costing me points, to be honest, because my defenders did very well for the most part, but at the same time, Van der Ven would have been better to hold on to in the long term, despite Spurs being a bit inconsistent, particularly at home. I still expect them to beat Copenhagen, and both Chelsea and Tottenham are in the top 6 for the clean sheet odds, as highlighted in my best wildcard video. So this is one potential transfer. The same goes for Mbappe to Rashford, or even someone like Alvarez or Lautaro Martinez. These are definitely great options on paper, but bear in mind with Inter Milan, after Kara Almaty, where the likes of Lautaro could be rested anyway, and we've seen rotation happen already in Matchday 3, for example, with the marker being benched, I think it's very important to keep in mind Matchday 5 and beyond, where Inter Milan have a very poor fixture swing. They went from having the best fixtures until Matchday 4, but after Kara Almaty, it's going to be a different story entirely, and the likes of Mbappe, Kane and Haaland are so good, it's difficult choosing one of them to sell, and even with Kane facing PSG and Arsenal away over the next 2, I would have qualms about selling him. The same goes for Mbappe, who blanked against Juventus, but against Liverpool away and even facing Man City fairly soon, Mbappe could still be the difference maker in those matches. But Marcus Rashford has been quite consistent for Barcelona in terms of attacking contributions, and in UCL Fantasy, he's one of the best forwards and he offers amazing value at 7.3 million. But that's not the only transfer I'm looking to make. Elise to Yamal is also a possibility, and I wouldn't even discount Bukayo Saka if we see him start in the early lineups tomorrow. So the 2 early kickoffs will be Napoli versus Frankfurt and Slavia Prague against Arsenal, but Yamal is still a great option. I would like to double up on the Barca attack. I'm less keen on their defence though. Jules Koundé might be the best of a relatively bad bunch. They're not keeping enough clean sheets, and ultimately ball recoveries can be very important in UCL Fantasy, and Koundé has been good at that historically, maybe not so much this season. But Yamal is suffering with a recurring injury. I think it's a groin issue, and that would be a bit of a concern. And ultimately, I'm quite happy that I got Fermin Lopez. He offers better value. He's the informed Barca attacker, showing real consistency. And Elise has been quite disappointing in UCL Fantasy this season, but I still believe he'll be quite consistent over the course of the campaign. And he's a big game player, so even against PSG and or Arsenal, he could get some goal contributions in those matches. And the last highlighted transfer is with my budget midfielder. I could sell Yilmaz, who has promising fixtures, but his minutes aren't entirely secure, and I think I could upgrade this midfielder to a more consistent option like Anthony Gordon, who has been terrible across all competitions, but not in the Champions League, where he's right up there amongst the highest goal scorers like Kane, Mbappe, and Erling Haaland. And speaking of which, to make this upgrade, I would have to sell one of those players to a Julian Alvarez, Lautaro Martinez, Osimhen, or Marcus Rashford to make this transfer possible. And whilst the -4 here isn't completely out of the question, I don't feel like I need to do that with my 15-man squad. So this will be my provisional team selection for Matchday 4 without making any transfers whatsoever. I have 2 available moves at my disposal. So David Raya will face Slavia Prague away, and Arsenal could rotate quite heavily tomorrow. We'll see the lineup during the deadline stream, but Raya should not be rotated for Kepa. So essentially Raya will start in the Premier League and Champions League, whilst Kepa will start in the FA Cup and Carabao Cup. And Arsenal have kept so many clean sheets this season. In fact, they've kept the most of any team in Europe's top 5 leagues, and they went an entire month without conceding a goal. Long may that continue, but Slavia Prague have been fairly decent in recent matches. They drew 0-0 against Atalanta back in Matchday 3, so they're no mugs, but Arsenal will be the favourites to win this game quite comprehensively, and another clean sheet is also likely. They are second in the clean sheet odds, only behind Inter Milan, and that's where the likes of Denzel Dumfries will come in, facing Kara Almaty at home, who are arguably one of the worst teams in the competition. But rotation could be a big issue for Inter Milan. We saw that in Matchday 3, and it wouldn't completely surprise me to see someone like Denzel Dumfries, Calhanoglu, or Lautaro Martinez on the bench. They are second in the Serie A table. They closed the gap on Napoli over the weekend, and that would also be a big priority. They've also got some very tough fixtures in the Champions League after Matchday 4, so if you have a triple up in Inter Milan, I would keep them, but it's worth tuning into my deadline stream because sometimes we get the Sky Sports Italia predicted lineup for Inter Milan, and they've been very accurate over the last year or two, and if we get that sort of information, it would be so important when determining our final transfer plans and knowing exactly what to do with these Inter Milan assets. I've also got Gabriel to double up on the Arsenal defence, and whilst he's not completely nailed on to start every single game, he's the most likely in the Arsenal defence. He has such a presence in terms of set pieces, but also a real leader at the back, and he is probably Arsenal's most important player right now, and he is making the difference in every single game. In FPL, he's getting 9 to 12 points very consistently with DEFCON, which is defensive contributions, a similar system to ball recoveries from UCL Fantasy. He's getting bonus points in FPL as well, goals, assists, clean sheets galore, and in UCL Fantasy, it's a combination of goal contributions, clean sheets, and ball recoveries as well. I've got Dan Burn, who I still like the look of, but Newcastle are a bit shaky and very inconsistent, so I would still back them to beat Athletic Bilbao at home, but I bought Dan Burn recently in FPL and he has been an absolute disaster for me with blanks in both matches so far, and he played terribly against Fulham over a week ago, but I still back him to do fairly well in this competition over the next couple of matches. But Lewis Hall is back, and Tino Livramento could also return fairly soon, probably after the international break. So whilst Eddie Howe loves Dan Burn, and any Newcastle fan will tell you that, there is no absolute guarantee that he will start every single match and maybe avoid rotation for the rest of the season. He's already played every single minute virtually, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Dan Burn on the bench at some stage in the Champions League. But Calhanoglu, Elise, Yildiz and Fermin Lopez is a solid midfield. Elise has been disappointing, as I mentioned before, but he's a quality player. We all know what he can do on the big stage, and Calhanoglu is a quality asset. He's on penalties, he can get ball recoveries, assists, like he did over the weekend in a 2-1 win for Inter Milan, but rotation could be a killer here, and I think Calhanoglu could be benched against Kara Almaty. It's just a gut feeling, an assumption. I hope I'm wrong, because I would love to have these two Inter Milan assets against Kara Almaty in Matchday 4, but it's worth tuning into that deadline stream, as I mentioned beforehand. And Yildiz missed the game over the weekend in Spalletti's first game in charge of Juventus. They got the victory, and Yildiz scored in the game prior to that from the penalty spot. So I do like the look of Yildiz. He's quite template actually, which might be off-putting for some people. And it's Sporting at home next, followed by some promising fixtures like Paphos away. So I think he's worth holding on to. But for those that didn't invest in Yildiz, it's probably worth waiting a little bit, seeing how Spalletti will do at Juventus, and also if Yildiz will be available. But I believe that will be the case. I'm not looking to sell him right now. And whilst Gordon, Igor Paxal and a few other midfielders would be quite appealing to replace him if need be, at this moment in time, it seems like he'll start against Sporting in Matchday 4, and therefore I see no reason to sell the Turkish international. The final midfielder in the starting 11 is Fermin Lopez, one of my heroes of Matchday 3, and he was the absolute game changer. He turned a decent week to a great one with that 20-pointer, and it's now Club Brugge away next. There is Chelsea on the horizon in Matchday 5 and also Frankfurt not so long after that, but Fermin Lopez should start most games for Barcelona. He has been very consistent for them in terms of goal contributions, and it all started with that hat-trick against Olympiacos. And finally, this front three is still worth keeping with Mbappe, Kane and Haaland, but if you want a Saka or Yamal in the midfield, potentially even both, you would have to make some downgrades in this position, and the main contenders would be Alvarez, Lautaro Martinez if he starts, Osimhen and Marcus Rashford. Those are my favourite forwards in UCL Fantasy right now, on top of these three who are probably the best until the end of the competition. On my bench, I've got Carnesecchi facing Marseille away. I'm not particularly optimistic about him, but the only reason I went for him is because he rotates well with Raya, except for Matchday 5, where I plan to Limitless anyway. That is not set in stone, and there is still a small chance I use the Limitless in Matchday 4, but my original plan was to do the Limitless in Matchday 5, and I'm going to stand by that as things stand. In terms of the other players, Gusto away to Karabag. He might not even start that game, otherwise I wouldn't mind keeping him, despite facing Barcelona in Matchday 5. There's also Yilmaz facing Ajax away, who are bottom of the Champions League table, so Galatasaray could get another famous victory there. And I've also got Ben Sebaini away to Man City. So there are some issues, but I've got 2 free transfers. And when I say issues, maybe weak points, at least for Matchday 4. So Ben Sebaini is a quality UCL fantasy asset because he's on penalties and can get ball recoveries, but it's Man City away next, and I don't think you'll get many returns there, maybe 3-4 points at a maximum, unless Dortmund get a penalty. And I look at the others, Yilmaz could be upgraded on, and Gusto is a rotation risk. The same could apply to any Inter Milan asset, so I am quite cautious about this, and that's why it's worth tuning into the deadline stream. I'll be compiling all the information from the Monday with the press conferences. The same goes for the Tuesday as things happen, and we could get some really important news and predicted lineups which inform our final transfer plans. And ultimately, you want to lock things in as early as you can. But I think in UCL Fantasy, because we get those early lineups for teams like Arsenal in Matchday 4, it's probably worth waiting until that and then having everything set with your captaincy, the starting 11, and all of that jazz. Speaking of which, on the Tuesday, my plan is to captain Kylian Mbappe despite facing Liverpool away. They've got 6 losses out of the last 8 games across all competitions, but they got that 2-0 win against Aston Villa over the weekend, but they were a little bit shaky still. Real Madrid won 4-0 against Valencia, and Mbappe scored a brace. He's in incredible form, so that blank against Juventus can be forgiven. Harry Kane, of course, as I mentioned, was rested a little bit against Bayer Leverkusen in that 3-0 win, and Haaland inevitably scored a brace against Bournemouth in a 3-1 win for Man City. Their fixtures are also decent, at least in the case of Erling Haaland facing his former club, Borussia Dortmund, and if need be, I will switch the captaincy to Erling Haaland. He is actually top of my captaincy rankings, which I talked about towards the end of my wildcard video, but you can't go wrong with this front three. I can't stress it enough, but if you want to make some crucial upgrades and changes in the midfield, it might be necessary to downgrade one of the big three. It's time for the fixture section where I analyse key stats and also the upcoming games for Matchday 4. The early kickoffs are Napoli versus Frankfurt and Slavia Prague against Arsenal. That means before the Matchday 4 deadline locks in, we'll have around an hour to see these lineups and act upon any information. Maybe you've got Bukayo Saka or want to bring him in. If you see him start, then you can buy him and make that sort of informed decision. In terms of the later matches on the Tuesday, there is Atletico Madrid against Union Saint-Gilloise, Bodo Glimt against Monaco, Juventus facing Sporting, who have won 5 consecutive games across all competitions. Liverpool against Real Madrid is a mouth-watering tie, despite the fact that Liverpool have been in poor form recently. We saw this fixture happen last season, and Liverpool got the victory. Olympiacos facing PSV, and another great game, unfortunately happening at the same time as Liverpool against Real Madrid, is PSG versus Bayern Munich. Those are the top 2 teams in the Champions League table, and the other 3 that have won every single game so far include Inter Milan, Arsenal, and Real Madrid, and only 2 teams haven't conceded a single goal in this competition, and that's Arsenal and Inter Milan. Then we've got Tottenham against Copenhagen, and moving on to tomorrow's games, well, I say tomorrow, it's Wednesday's games. This video is recorded on Monday, just to let you know. Paphos versus Villarreal, and we've also got Karabag against Chelsea. So for those with Gusto or any Chelsea assets, the good thing is we actually get those lineups, and you can then decide if you want to bring them on as a substitute or not. And make sure with your starting 11 to start every single Tuesday player, captain a Tuesday option as well, and you can change this accordingly. There is a how to play guide on my channel, and I also discuss this throughout my content as well. The other matches include Ajax versus Galatasaray. Both Benfica and Bayer Leverkusen are in the bottom 6, and they face each other. Benfica are actually second bottom in 35th spot. Club Brugge against Barcelona. Inter Milan facing Kara Almaty seems like a mismatch. Manchester City against Borussia Dortmund. Marseille against Atalanta, and Newcastle against Athletic Bilbao. Those are the matches for Game Week 4, and I also want to highlight the team of the week for Matchday 3. And in terms of the players I've got, Fermin Lopez, Gabriel, and Dumfries. Those 3 carried my team, even though on the Tuesday every single player returned for me. Anthony Gordon on the left wing, but he has been awful in the Premier League. No goals and no assists there for the Newcastle winger. Moving on here to the stats sort of highlighted section, you can see Yamal with the most dribbles with 11 in Matchday 3, and Victor Osimhen had 7 shots on target. And the other important stat is the ball recoveries, because that's what's going to give you points. Even with dribbles, I love seeing these magicians, over the years like Messi, who just get you off your seat. Yamal is one of those from this new generation, but the most important, I think, stats from this would be shots on target. Osimhen having 7 is very impressive, despite that plum fixture against Bodo Glimt that just went by. He could get 3 or 4 shots on target against Ajax with the way they're playing, but I think with ball recoveries, that is something you want to focus on in UCL Fantasy. It's different to Fantasy Premier League because in that game, it combines clearances, blocks, interceptions, and tackles, whilst in UCL Fantasy, it's just about recovering the ball. Now, speaking of which, you can see over the course of the season, some defensive rocks. Lucas Torreira, formerly of Arsenal, is in this list, and it's not the first time that Lucasen from Paphos is in one of these highlighted sections. He has been very impressive so far this season, and with attacking threat, Michael Lise and Bernardo Silva are highlighted for 2 different metrics, which might not be so important in UCL Fantasy, and Anthony Gordon has completed the most dribbles this season, which was quite surprising when I saw it. From these players that you see, Yamal and Gordon are the ones you want to target in UCL Fantasy. Doku is always exciting to watch as a dribbler, but his end product is lacking, so ultimately I would avoid him in UCL Fantasy as well. And in terms of most shots on target for the entire Champions League campaign so far, Kylian Mbappe is top with 14. Victor Osimhen is second, and of course he's got 10 for the campaign, and 7 of them came in Matchday 3. Harry Kane and Erling Haaland also complete the top 4, so once again the big 3 stamp their mark on UCL Fantasy. And the same goes for the top scorers. Who is going to win the Golden Boot this season? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But currently, Harry Kane and Mbappe are tied with 5 goals. And in terms of UCL Fantasy points, Kane has 1 extra point over Mbappe, who scored a hat-trick against Kara Almaty back in Matchday 2, but he blanked against Juventus, and that's what separates the 2 players. Anthony Gordon, Haaland, and Rashford all have 4 goals. Then there's Barnes, Fermin Lopez, also Martinelli, Lautaro Martinez, Nemecha, and a few other players there on 3 goals, like Igor Paxal and Osimhen, and those are the players I'd highlight as viable UCL Fantasy options in the long term. But Gabriel Martinelli is currently injured. We'll see if he's available for Matchday 4. Any team news, injury updates, and press conferences will be covered in tomorrow's deadline stream. And finally, we've got the most points across all positions, and the top 2 are defenders. Denzel Dumfries and Nuno Mendes, only 1 point separates them. Harry Kane is in the podium with Anthony Gordon and Mbappe in the top 5. And these 2 big hitters up front in Kane and Mbappe are some way ahead of Erling Haaland, who hasn't been completely explosive yet in the Champions League so far, but that could obviously change in the coming matches. And I do back him as the top captain for Matchday 4. But remember, captain a Tuesday player first, and then if needed, you can switch it on the Wednesday before those matches begin. And the same goes for substitutions. Have your Tuesday players start and have some Wednesday players on the bench and make the changes accordingly. The structure can be important, but don't be too boggled down about the details. The ideal structure would be 8 or 9 Tuesday players and the rest would be on the Wednesday. But If it's the other way around, or if you've got 10 players on the Tuesday, 5 on the Wednesday, don't worry about it too much. The most important thing is picking the best assets, the ones you back to get the most points. That can be a combination of form, fixtures, and the things I analyze throughout my content. But of course, be mindful about different aspects of UCL Fantasy, which I always try to emphasize in my content. The structure can be one part, but it shouldn't determine your overall squad for the Champions League. A common question that will likely be asked in tomorrow's deadline stream is, if you had to sell one of Haaland, Mbappe, or Kane, who would it be? And because of the next 2 match days being against PSG and Arsenal, I would probably pick Harry Kane, and downgrading him to an Alvarez, Osimhen, Lautaro Martinez, or someone else I've mentioned before, that would be the way to go. And I think Alvarez would be in pole position to replace Kane if needed, and I could use that to fund Yilmaz up to Igor Paxal. I could even go to Anthony Gordon and have a more expensive midfield in general. Gordon obviously leads the charts for points amongst midfielders. Martinelli is just behind him, but he is a doubt, of course, for Matchday 4. But ultimately, I would have enough money to do something like this. 0.2 left over in the bank, and it does bolster my midfield. But I still got a few weak links in my defensive line because of Malo Gusto, who might not start, and it's also Barcelona in Matchday 5. That was a mistake of mine, buying Malo Gusto in the first place. Ben Sebaini is a good option, but in terms of Matchday 4, it's Man City away, and really are hoping for ball recoveries and a little bit of a penalty there, a jammy penalty at the Etihad. So those are my transfer plans really for Matchday 4 as things stand, but this could obviously change a little bit based on the information that I'll provide tomorrow. And across the Monday and Tuesday, there'll be press conferences and more injury updates, and we'll find out more about which players are available. Maybe some turn out to be doubtful, and they'll all be covered in tomorrow's deadline stream. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both UCL Fantasy and FPL over the course of the season. Let's get this video to the 200 likes and close in on new goals like 37k on YouTube. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships. Further likes to my videos, prioritize comments amongst many other perks, and they'll be very useful in tomorrow's deadline stream. There's also my Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and Spotify in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for the Matchday 4 deadline stream and much more content for Fantasy Premier League ahead of the Game Week 11 deadline on Saturday with the transfer tips, best wildcard squad, and my team selection.